Okay, so I want to talk about, I'm going to start the conversation off with the Adam and Eve story, and we'll see where we go from there. So I was raised in a Southern Baptist church, which I only say that so that you have context of where I was coming from with the story, because I was always taught, obviously I was taught that story, but I was always taught that to view it as though it was the woman's fault that Adam took a bite of this apple, and it's the woman's fault that we were cast out of the Garden of Eden, and had it not been for her, everything would have been fine. And that idea that it's the woman's responsibility to guide the men into doing the right thing, or that men have no agency, or that we didn't give them a choice, or that we were asking for what was coming to us, like that idea that like women have to constantly make up for like the make up for a mistake that one woman made, which, by the way, she didn't make that mistake on her own. Like, he absolutely had agency. And the idea that young women are taught this, or at least the young women that attended my church were taught this, is really baffling, because then it puts you in the mindset of like, well, maybe I deserved to be hit. Maybe I deserved not to be given a choice, which is never the case. That is never true. But it was that same line of thinking that we were taught, that we grew up with. So, and then you put that into a family structure and you're like, well, of course, like, I should not be left to make the decisions, because, women can't make those kinds of decisions. Like, it's which is so funny, because it's in the same breath you're saying like women cannot make those decisions. We absolutely cannot, because in the past, like, look what happened. But also, like, it absolutely is a woman's fault that this happened. What? Like, pick a side and stick to it, because that doesn't make any sense. So I thought that, so coming into the story, like, that was my mindset. Not at all that like women deserve X, Y, and Z, or it's our fault or any of that. But like, that's just where, when I think of that story, that's what I think of. So it was really interesting to hear everybody else's perspectives, especially when you add that to the family structure and the patriarchy, which, by the way, anytime like I can talk about the patriarchy, I will. Like, I'm really trying this year for that to be my theme of the year, the patriarchy, anytime I can talk about it. But also, when you think about the pursuit of happiness, like this woman in the cardboard box, the cardboard box of happiness, she is basically saying, I would rather be without a home than without a man. Like, that, I'm paraphrasing, but that's what I gathered from the first part of her story. Like, basically everything sans the last paragraph. Like, that's her mindset. And it did strike a chord in me, and I was like, did you go to church too? Like, that's immediately what I thought of, because like, women are taught that like you cannot be happy without a man. I think, to be fair to men, like, maybe even men are taught like you cannot be happy without someone else. Like, your happiness is minute, but especially for women. Like, maybe men can be successful in their careers and like that's good, but women, first of all, if you have a career, how dare you? It's your job to take care of the children, obviously. So I was just like, no. And then, when we get to the last paragraph, she obviously comes to that conclusion, like talking to herself, looking back. She's like, absolutely not. No, that was a very naive way to think about it. And I was like, well, thank goodness, because could you imagine? Also, it's the way that in women's pursuit to like find their happiness, it is blasphemous to think that we can have multiple partners in finding that happiness. But if a man does it, like, he's a better man, like this. But like, for a woman to do that, she's a slut or she's a whore. Like, that idea is completely ridiculous. It's that like idea that I just find so interesting, and I find that it does have an undertone in almost every piece of literature that like we read. Not to say, like, obviously not to say that men are the problem or anything. Like, it's the system that we've been raised in. Like, what did you expect for people to think if that's all they've ever known? Do you know what I mean? So I'm excited to talk more about that in class and to talk about patriarchy as much as I can.